this will be a response to both Avi and Gary, JasperAve and InMendham, on the issue of suffering and its subjectivity and objectivity. Though I don't want to speak of it in those terms as if it were either subjective or objective. I have issues with that whole dichotomy because, as far as I'm concerned, they never exist apart from one another. Objective and subjective are interrelated poles of reality. Reality is basically a process of ongoing interchange between these two. So when it comes to pain or suffering, I would say that there's a difference between these two in that pain is basically something we feel immediately. I cut myself, I feel the pain that my nerve endings express because the integrity of my body has been compromised. Suffering, however, is something I would say that only very complex mammals can experience, humans especially so. Suffering is the ability to foresee not only pain, but death. I think many complex mammals, non-human mammals, can foresee pain. Whether or not other mammals besides humans can foresee death, I'm not so sure about. I'm willing to assume that only humans can foresee their own death and really contemplate death as a reality, not so much as an event within their lives, because to die is the end of all events, at least as far as how we could possibly define the meaning of the term event while we're alive. The event of death is somehow transcending all the other events of our lives. In a way, it's the very precondition of human life, the fact that you should be aware of your death. Children aren't aware of this. I can distinctly remember the moment when I became aware of the fact that, first I actually became aware that my mother was going to die, and then I became aware that I, myself, would also die. And, I was troubled by this, obviously. And from that point on, not only am I, as a living organism, capable of experiencing pain, I'm also capable of suffering, of experiencing anxiety, which is, in a way, it's a fear of the unknown. So, human beings, I think, are in a precarious position, a position that no other animal on this planet, at least as far as we can tell, is in. And this is where I really agree with Gary's position, at least in the sense that suffering is a very real reality for human beings. We can't escape it, at least not without coming to terms with death. In a sense, human beings have instincts that allow us, or are supposed to allow us, to fulfill certain needs that we have. We've got to be able to eat, we need shelter, we need a basic sense of emotional reciprocation from a community. We're social animals. But the thing is, for humans, once these needs are met, there's still something left over. There's a desire for something more, which arises precisely because we are aware that we're going to die, eventually. And so desire is desire defined as that which is left over after all of our needs have been met. Desire is basically for transcendence. It's basically spiritual. We don't want to die. We want to live forever. So this is where I think, let's just go with Buddhism as an example of a spiritual tradition. the Buddhist path begins with the realization that life is suffering. Suffering is caused by desire. Now, what is desire? Desire is is directed towards living forever. We want to live forever. We don't want to die, and we also want to live, with all our needs met. We don't want to be in pain. We don't want to suffer. But we get confused here because there's a difference between living forever and eternity, true transcendence. And until we distinguish between these two, we are not capable of enlightenment. So the Buddhist path is supposed to give us the wisdom and the moral understanding required to realize the difference between living forever and transcendent eternity. Living forever is an endless amount of time, and so it is literally wanting to live as opposed to dying. Eternity is not in time. It has nothing to do with time. It's not forever in the sense of endless time. It's just other than time. I would say that eternity includes time, but it can't be understood in terms of an endless amount of time. There is no distinction in terms of eternity between life and death. We're already dead, just as we were never born. And there's a contradiction when you try to understand the meaning of those two phrases in time, but from the perspective of eternity, which is not a perspective, because by definition a perspective is somewhere, somewhen within space and time. Eternity is not. That's all you can say about it. It is not this, it is not that. But from the so-called perspective of eternity, life and death are indistinguishable. Nirvana, bliss, and suffering, or samsara, are one and the same. Of course, we have two words, so that leads us to believe that there are two separate realms. There's a heaven and there's a hell. There's life and pleasure, and there is suffering and death. But this is a duality which arises only when we have not brought ourselves into contact with eternity, which is difficult to do. Only the human being can be in contact, or not be in contact with reality. The rest of the natural world, the rest of the universe, seems to be timeless. It seems not to be aware of its own existence. Only the human being dies. The rest of the world was never born. Its life is of the same process as its death. The human being, with its words, with its conscience, with its fears and anxieties, with its funerals where people cry, the human being is the one who somehow is able to fall from heaven. Let's see, here we are on earth now, living our separate, illusionary lives, suffering, supposing that our death was the end of our lives. And we don't recognize that the end, an end is synonymous with a purpose, with a goal. And so it's true in a way. Life is only given meaning because of death. The fragility of our existence constitutes its beauty. So death is the meaning of life. The destiny of each and every one of us is to die. And yet from the perspective of no perspective, of eternity, life is none other than death. And so while we suffer, our openness to pain and our openness to pleasure, they're both results of the fact that we can feel that the universe is aware of itself. And not only aware that it loves itself, it desires itself. And that desire is what makes the world go round. It makes the earth circle the sun, and it makes the creatures upon the surface of the earth evolve. There would be no time if there were not beings who loved one another. Eternity is the being which transcends any of these particular finite beings who love one another. It's the love before desire emerged due to apparent separateness. So, at the end of the day, I don't disagree with Gary's basic stance. I just, after Gary is done explaining the basic human situation, I just want to then add that there's a cure for this disease. There's a path beyond this affliction. It's not easily understood. If it were, then the world would not be in the situation in which it is. But just because it's difficult doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue this path, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't offer people hope that such a path is available and can be practiced and can be learned.